Exercise 10, transitions. First thing we need to do is to lift off into the hover. Good look out to the right, good look out to the left, and looking out above us. Having carried out our pre-takeoff checks, I'm now smoothly raising the lever, maintaining the RPM at the top end of the green band, looking ahead as I feel the aircraft coming light on the skids, keeping it straight with the pedals, maintaining my position over the ground with the cyclic, checking the lever at a 5-foot skid height, and then checking temperatures and pressures. All good, warning lights out, power 23 inches, RPM top end of the green. Rotating the aircraft now to the left for a good look out for a 360-degree spot turn. Left pedal going in, height is maintained with the collective lever, and our position over the ground is maintained by displacing the cyclic into wind. Steady rate of rotation, keeping the aircraft coming round, and here we are back into wind, ready to set off for the transition. Before we go, we want to pick ourselves a reference point ahead. And we have to, of course, make a radio call to the tower. Hotel Lima, circuit right.
Hotel Lima, circuit right.
Hotel Lima. My reference point ahead is the bush in the middle distance, and using that to keep the aircraft straight, I'm going to ease the cyclic forward. Cyclic going forward, raising the lever to prevent the sink as the aircraft falls off its ground cushion, cyclic going further forward to overcome the flatback, and accelerating close to the ground, at no stage allowing the aircraft to descend. Tail rotor becomes more efficient as we gain forward speed, so I can ease off a little bit of left pedal, and at 55 knots indicated airspeed, I've rotated the nose to look for the 60 knot climbing attitude. What we're going to have a look at now is the approach from level flight back to the hover, and our gate position is going to be 500 feet and 60 knots, and our landing point is going to be the numbers 25 on the runway, which you can see through the windscreen just below the compass. Our rate of closure is maintained with the cyclic, in other words our airspeed, and in the latter stages we'll be concentrating on our ground speed, controlled with cyclic. And our rate of descent or glide path is controlled with the collective lever. So we keep the aircraft coming all the way down, maintaining our glide path with lever, maintaining our ground speed with the cyclic. Keeping the same position, keeping those numbers 25 in exactly the same position on the windscreen. In the latter stages, we're actually going to lose those numbers under the nose as we bring the aircraft to the hover. So we need to pick ourselves out some lateral markers, which are going to be some red and white cones either side of the numbers. So we keep the aircraft coming forwards, rate of closure being controlled with the cyclic, rate of descent or glide path being controlled with the collective lever. I'm now starting to ease the aircraft towards the hover by reducing my forward speed, and as I start to reduce the forward speed even further, I have to compensate for the lack of translational lift by raising the collective lever. Gradually easing the cyclic forward into the hover attitude, looking ahead to keep the aircraft straight, coming into the hover using my lateral markers, and there we are in the hover from the transition. What we want to have a look at now is what happens if we get too high or too low on our final approach. First of all, we want to note the numbers. This is the ideal picture that we should have, the ideal sight picture approach, just below the numbers, just below the point on the compass. Now let's have a look and see what happens if we get too high. I think you'll see those numbers starting to go down the windscreen. They're getting lower and lower down the windscreen as we get too high, and the aircraft becomes too steep on its approach. So if we think about that, we can think, yes, we can get down, but there's only one way we can get down, and that is by increasing our rate of descent, in other words, lowering the lever, and at the same time, if we're going to be able to see those numbers, we're coming back on the cyclic, and we have a quick look inside the cockpit, and we see that the airspeed has washed right off. So what's that going to do? It's going to put us in a high rate of descent with a low indicated airspeed, in other words, a vortex condition. So if we get into that state, the first thing to do is nose forward with the cyclic to pick up airspeed, and then bring in the power to overshoot. The next thing we want to have a look at is what happens if we get too low. Those numbers, looking at those numbers all the time. the numbers 25. If we get too low, those numbers are going to become very flat. In other words, they'll come up the windscreen and they'll come much closer to the compass. And in fact, we'll get to a stage where we're almost unable to read the numbers 25 because they're so flat. There we are. That is the approach that would be far too low. So what do we do about this? Well, there's only one obvious thing to do, and that is to maintain our height. In other words, bring the power in with the collective lever, maintain our height until we pick up our correct sight picture approach. And we're just coming into the correct sight picture approach once again here. So now we lower the lever just a touch, keep the aircraft coming forwards and down, ground speed with cyclic, and lever controlling our rate of descent. Until once again we come back to our ideal position in the hover over the numbers 25.